Welcome to Analytics Nexus. Thanks for joining us for Laura Reed's presentation, Mastering Adobe Classifications, Connecting Campaigns to Conversations.
Hello, thank you for joining me as I discuss Mastering Adobe Classifications, Connecting Campaigns to Conversions. To give you an idea of the agenda for today, we'll be kicking off with a high-level introduction to today's presentation and a little background on me. Then we'll move into a high-level overview of classifications to contextualize the subject and to provide some ways you may have come across classifications elsewhere in your daily life. We'll follow that up with perhaps the most common use case for classifications, campaign analysis. Finally, we'll review some technology options for implementing classifications in Adobe. The primary objectives for today's presentation are twofold. First, to educate analysts and other marketing professionals on the value of classifications, and second, to provide an overview of how to use classifications in Adobe Analytics. Towards these objectives, we will be discussing three main topics: a general overview of classifications and how they may be used in everyday life, a campaign classification use case, and finally, some technology options for implementing classifications in Adobe. A little bit about me. I have been working in digital marketing and advertising functions across multiple industries for about 20 years. Earlier in my career, I co-founded a consumer brand in the telecommunications industry. Currently, I am the director of the Adobe consulting practice for Blend 360, a marketing agency with a strong presence in the data science and marketing technology fields. I currently hold 2 Adobe Certified Expert certifications, as well as certifications in project management and web analytics, and an MBA from Villanova University. My proudest achievement, however, are my 2 boys, pictured here. Now that we've gotten the introduction out of the way, let's get to the good stuff. Classifications are everywhere. They are especially common in science. For example, the periodic table enables you to classify elements by type, symbol, atomic number, atomic mass, and many other useful criteria. The classification of the animal kingdom, which enables you to identify an animal by phylum, class, order, family, genus, and species. And classifications of medications, which can include medication type, drug class, whether it is on or off patent, delivery mechanism, whether it is black box labeled or not, if it is over the counter or prescription, the conditions treated, and other criteria. Classifications are also common in the government sector. Think of the VIN number for your vehicle. Did you know that your VIN number or vehicle identification number can be broken out into usable data, and that each section of letters and numbers contained within the VIN means something? It is not just a randomly assigned number to your vehicle. The same is true for your Social Security number. Each section of your Social Security number can be broken down further. The first section, historically, has been an indicator of the geographic region where the card was issued, while the other 2 sections are randomly assigned serial numbers. Finally, classifications are also common in education. Do you remember the Dewey Decimal and card catalog systems that existed before simple web searches to locate library books? I sure do. Those systems are also methods of classification. Another example is the ISBN identifier for each published book. So, what exactly are classifications? Classifications are the result of the process of arranging items in groups based on common, predefined criteria. In other words, it is grouping things in ways they are alike. You may have seen this meme below on the web, particularly around April Fool's Day. In it, someone has placed M&Ms, Skittles, and Reese's Pieces all in a single bowl. You may think of Katniss from the Hunger Games here. May the odds be ever in your favor in terms of getting the sweet treat that you desire. If you were to classify this big bowl of candies, you might choose to do so by color, flavor, writing or no writing, chocolate or non-chocolate, brand, manufacturer, or even shape and size. Two final examples of classifications in everyday life may be restaurants, which can be classified by type, cuisine, the average cost of an entree or location, or movies, which can be classified by genre, for example, romance, action, or sci-fi, the actors that appear in the movie, or critic ratings. Rotten Tomatoes, anyone? I hope that overview provided you with a contextual understanding of classifications and how they may be used in everyday life. Let's focus our attention on a specific use case for classifications that you may have come across during your career, the need to understand campaign performance. Is this situation familiar to you? You are a marketing leader for an organization and are assigned a specific budget for your annual digital advertising budget. This budget may be in the millions of dollars or smaller, depending on the size of your organization and the amount of investment in marketing or advertising. It is your job to optimize the spend of the digital marketing budget in order to drive as many conversions as possible. Conversions can be anything from an order in retail to a new account for financial services to downloading specific information in the pharmaceutical industry. You may have a media buying agency partner that can tell you how many people converted based on the media that they purchased for you. They may or may not measure the start of the conversion process and most likely do not capture the visitor's website behavior that led to the conversion. One of the organizations I worked for in the past referred to this as the big black box of conversions. I don't know about you, but I have often felt like this woman here, where I am investing in marketing or advertising, but I have no real understanding about how my budget is spent or how to optimize it to result in the most conversions. So, what's the solution? Enter the campaign ID. Going back to the earlier VIN example, you can consider the campaign ID to be the VIN for your campaign. Each set of characters of the campaign ID can be decoded to represent something meaningful for your campaign. For example, marketing channel, launch date, target audience, and more. One of the best benefits of the campaign ID is that it is a unique objective identifier that can be applied to all forms of trackable media. Note, it would not apply to natural search or organic social media posts. Although your media agency partner may capture similar information in their tool of choice, for example, Google Campaign Manager, this information is available only to media that they manage. With the campaign ID, internal teams that may not use agency partners have as much access to the data as outside agencies. Data is democratized, and all forms of trackable media can be measured against each other in a consistent manner. A key learning developed from building out this functionality for a large financial services firm was that it is important to have consistency in approach for the campaign ID within a business line, but flexibility should be considered across business lines. The campaign ID is designed to measure website behavior and activity, not just media-related metrics like impressions and clicks. Marketers and analysts can tie campaign ID information to all site activities, including process starts, conversions, and engagement metrics, to understand what site content or tools may influence conversion activity. Below is an example of a campaign ID that you might use in your company. Note that it clearly delineates the different sections of the key value, the raw campaign ID, and is not readily readable to competitors or customers when applied to landing pages for production-level marketing efforts. In order to implement the campaign ID and associated campaign reporting, several Adobe Analytics features may be involved. They include the tracking code metric, which is also known as s.campaign. This is a standard metric available in Adobe Analytics and is the variable that should capture the raw campaign ID. Sync classifications, including Rule Builder. Adobe classifications enable users to parse out the raw campaign ID into meaningful and friendly subsets of data for analysis purposes. Marketing campaign channel manager and processing rules. The marketing channel functionality of Adobe Analytics should be used as a supplement to, rather than a replacement for, the tracking code metric. This functionality can help segment campaign IDs into separate marketing channels, but will not be able to capture information more granularly than that. The ultimate goal of creating and implementing the campaign ID in Adobe Analytics is to capture high-value campaign information and then use this information in various campaign reports for cross-channel campaign analysis. Adobe classifications have several benefits, which can be particularly useful for campaign analysis. First, classifications can increase the user-friendliness of raw data. This can be especially helpful to non-technical marketers or analysts. Second, users don't require a data dictionary to interpret the data. Classifications group raw data into usable categories based on user need. Third, if the data has errors, it is possible to modify values using classifications to clean up the data. This can include misspellings or similar errors in values. Finally, classifications are retroactive. If you need to update information for classifications, you can update them in the future and have your retroactive data classified per the rules unique to your organization. One last key point about Adobe classifications in general. They can be used for more variables than simply campaigns. I have seen them used to classify pages, products, or even days of the week, when the days were brought in as numbers rather than by their specific name. Classifying days of the week was important to this organization, as day 1 may reference Monday or Sunday, depending on the organization. Campaign classifications can be useful in many different ways and for many different audiences. They can be used to roll campaign data up to provide executives with high-level information appropriate for making budgeting decisions. For example, executives can understand the performance of paid search versus email and where the ROI is greatest. The marketing channel with the greatest ROI is likely where they will invest more in the future. Campaign classifications can also be used to roll campaign data down to provide marketing managers with detailed information appropriate for making marketing optimization decisions. For example, marketing managers responsible for email can gain insight into what headline, content, and delivery partner provides the most conversions. Campaign classifications can be tailored to any audience. It all depends on how the campaign classifications are built, defined, and used. Care should be given to ensure that data is available at the right level for all critical users, including analysts. When it comes to creating classifications in Adobe Analytics, the system establishes a connection between the variable and metadata related to that variable. There are 3 technical options to consider with classifications. Classification Importer, which is a built-in functionality into Adobe Analytics. Classification Rule Builder, which is also a built-in functionality of Adobe Analytics. I would be remiss to not mention our sponsor, Claravine, as an additional option to implement classifications in Adobe Analytics. Claravine can be used to establish an automated method of building, populating, and modifying classifications in Adobe Analytics, and can be used for any type of classifications, not just those associated with campaigns. I personally have worked with Claravine to implement campaigns for a very large financial institution and have found that the experience with Claravine is consistent with how I will be laying it out in this document. For each option, I will be sharing some basic information about functionality, pros and cons, and key processes to implement this option from a high level. The classification importer in Adobe Analytics uses built-in functionality to manually upload classifications into Adobe Analytics. Some pros associated with this methodology include users can download a template from Adobe Analytics to match the exact needed format for data. Options to upload classifications include using the browser for small files or via FTP for larger, more complex files. It enables the bulk upload of classification data to Adobe Analytics as a single file. It is easier to adjust and/or capture raw data values that may not be perfectly clean. It is easier to understand the history of classifications through uploaded files, assuming these files are properly maintained. Some cons associated with this methodology include the format required for the data template is very specific. This method is very manually intensive and more error-prone than other methods. It can be very time-consuming to maintain it. The template method limits the classification data download to a specific report suite. Multiple files will need to be generated and re-uploaded to Adobe Analytics if there are multiple report suites. Any changes to the template or data collected requires repeating the download and upload process again. Now I want to show you a general idea of what it looks like in the Adobe tool. So you can find the classification importer in Adobe Analytics under the admin tool, assuming you have the appropriate level of access. And here you'll see that you can download the template with the exactly right format as discussed in the pros and cons section of this slide. And here you can dictate what report suite you want to download the information from, what data set you want to classify, and then simply download your document. I've already done this, and this is what the output will look like. And the first three fields are generated by default by SiteCatalyst or Adobe Analytics. And then you'll see that the remaining fields for line 4 provide the name of the key value that you want to classify on, as well as each of the metadata fields that you would need to fill out. So if you were going to use this method, you would have to manually update this spreadsheet in order to capture the data that you want to bring back into Adobe. Then once you've finished updating that spreadsheet, you can import your file via this option in the classification importer. And you can select where you want to upload it to for what report suite and what campaign, or sorry, what data set. You can also export the file via browser export or FTP export as previously discussed. The key processes for the use of the classification importer include aligning on requirements for the campaign ID structure, components, and values, and documenting the final requirements, gaining approval from any governance teams that are required to review this variable from a legal or privacy perspective, implementing and configuring the classifications by downloading the data template for the structure of the classification file, manually updating key and metadata values for classifications, uploading revised templates with new values, and then finally testing and validating classification structure that is built within Analytics. Once you have implemented and configured, you will need to validate that the campaign IDs are correctly populating, both in terms of the raw key values as well as the classified values. This process should be well documented. Auditing user access to ensure that the users have the correct access needed to perform necessary activities, no more and no less. And then finally, developing campaign reports at the right level of detail for the audience, whether they are ad hoc or recurring reports. Next, I'm going to talk about the classification rule builder option. The classification rule builder option enables administrators to develop automated rule-based classifications and applying rule sets to multiple report suites within Adobe Analytics. Some pros associated with this methodology include the automation of classification rules. Administrators can set classification logic once and let it run until or unless there are required changes in the future. This methodology supports regular expressions as well as standard rule logic, and it is much more efficient than the classification importer method if the raw data values are clean. Some cons associated with this methodology include the setup can be very time-consuming. Rule set logic is not always easy for non-technical marketers who may not understand the exact method to implement these rules. Rule sets can only be applied for one variable at a time, although they can apply to multiple report suites. If raw data values are not perfectly clean, it may result in more unclassified values than expected or desired. And change history is more difficult to understand than with the classification importer, as the history will need to be maintained outside of the tool. Now I'm going to give you a quick view of the classification rule builder in Adobe Analytics. Similar to the classification importer, the classification rule builder can be found under the admin menu of the Adobe Analytics tool, assuming you have the appropriate level of access. In order to use the classification rule builder, you'll want to start with building out a sample rule set or a rule set in general. The rule set will be where all of the different values that you're creating will be contained. The first thing you should do is select the report suites and variables that you want to modify and where you want to collect the data. So if I click on the add button here, I can select the desired report suite. And then I can also select the desired variable, which I'm going to select campaign for the cross-industry demo data account, and then simply click Save. Now, once you have selected where you want the report suite data to go and where the variables that you want to also modify, you can start creating the rules that will go into your rule set. You can see here, you can follow a few different standard rule logic, such as starts with, ends with, or contains different values, or you can use a regular expression. You also would need to add the match criteria, and then you would need to assign the value of the classification as well as the name of the classification that you want to classify. When you have completed your rule set, then you will want to make sure that you have activated the classification rules by clicking on the activation button. Similar to the classification importer, the key processes for the use of the classification rule builder include aligning on requirements for the campaign ID structure, components, and values, and documenting the final requirements, gaining approval from any governance teams that are required to review this variable from a legal or privacy perspective, implementing and configuring the classifications by defining rule sets and associated rules for each variable for each relevant report suite, and testing and validating the classification structure built within Adobe Analytics. Next, you'll want to validate that campaign IDs are correctly populating, both in terms of the raw key values as well as the classified values. This process should be well documented. You should also audit user access to ensure that the users have the correct access needed to perform necessary activities, no more and no less. And finally, you should develop campaign reports at the right level of detail for the audience, either ad hoc or recurring reports. The third option to implement classifications in Adobe Analytics is to use a third-party tool like Claravine to automate the creation of campaign IDs or other classifications. Some of the benefits of the Claravine tool include unlimited, consistent templates that allow for custom logic based on the structure of data elements, automatic integration with Adobe Analytics, enforcement of data governance requirements. No values will be accepted that don't meet the predefined and pre-built criteria, automation of many aspects of the campaign ID testing, which can save valuable resource and analyst time. This can include making sure that the URL is structured properly, that the domain of the website resolves and is an actual website, and the web page is also an existing web page. It also includes validating that Adobe Analytics is capturing the data and it is capturing it in the correct report suite and in the correct report, which in this case would be campaign. Another benefits of the Claravine tool include the generation of correctly formatted URLs containing campaign IDs for implementation that can be provided directly to your development team or your agency partners for implementation. The reporting of historical campaign codes to ensure uniqueness, and the ability to set access at user and admin levels. The key processes for the use of Claravine initially are similar to that of the classification importer and rule builder options and include aligning on requirements for the campaign ID structure, components, and values, and documenting the final requirements, gaining approval from any governance teams that are required to review this variable from a legal or privacy perspective, implementing and configuring the classifications by configuring relevant report suites in Adobe Analytics to correctly capture campaign ID and all classified values, setting up machine ID connections from Claravine to Adobe Analytics, configuring the Claravine template to correctly create and submit campaign ID to Adobe Analytics, testing and validating classification structure built within Adobe Analytics, and using the templates to create relevant campaign IDs through Claravine. Next, you should validate that campaign IDs are correctly populating, both in terms of the raw key values as well as the classified values. This process should be well documented. Next, you will need to follow with training users, administrators, and executives and the value and usage of Claravine and documenting training materials and videos for ongoing training. You'll also want to follow with auditing user access to ensure that the users have the correct access needed to perform necessary activities, no more and no less. And finally, developing campaign reports at the right level of detail for the audience, either ad hoc or recurring reports. As I close the discussion of the technical options for classifications in Adobe Analytics, I wanted to share with you some general project considerations, lessons learned over the years of managing campaign ID implementation projects. First, think broadly. A project may impact more stakeholders than expected. If you don't, this may come back to bite you, as a missed stakeholder may have critical information or may be a squeaky wheel and will have more influence on the project than they should. Second, training is critical, especially when operational owners are decentralized. In organizations where each business line manages their own implementation, rather than a centralized team, training can be difficult, but is crucial to ensure adoption and usage of the information. This training will need to be provided in many different formats, live, videos, and documentation, and will need to be updated often. Third, I recommend that you conduct a proof of concept. Regardless of outcome, you can quickly derive people, process, and technology insights, all at limited risk. Finally, transition points can make or break a project. Ensure that transitions and handoffs are clearly documented and that all parties clearly understand and agree to ongoing expectations. You may even want to consider a formal written agreement with other departments within your organization that can be referenced regarding scope and roles and responsibilities going forward. To recap, the primary objectives for today's presentation were twofold. First, to educate analysts and other marketing professionals on the value of classifications, and second, to provide an overview of how to use classifications in Adobe Analytics. Towards these objectives, we discussed the following three topics: a general overview of classifications and how they may be used in everyday life, a campaign classification use case, and finally, some technology options for implementing classifications in Adobe. Thank you for your time today, and I hope you learned some new information and/or some information you can take back to your marketing team to start optimizing your use of classifications in Adobe Analytics.
Thanks so much for watching this presentation. Join us on the Analytics Nexus Slack to talk with our presenters about this topic and more.